Pulisic scored again from the spot, then did, let's just call it, the best, worst worm I've ever seen. There are, let's just say, intestinal worms that I've suffered that are less painful than the one that we had to watch last night.
Well, maybe this was a comment on the intestinal worms that some of his teammates had picked up in Mexico.
A tribute, lads. I know you're suffering, but this worm is worse than whatever you got inside it.
To the actual football now, Rog. USA 5, Panama 1. The US men's national team move within inches of qualifying for the Men's World Cup 2022 with an emphatic victory over Los Canaderos in Jamlando. The US were up 3-0 in the first 27 minutes thanks to a Christian Pulisic penalty, a really impressive Paul Arriola header, glancer, and an FC Dallas-inspired Jesus Ferreira close-range finish. CP10 added 2 more to complete his hat-trick, and even though the team named after a Van Halen track pulled one back late on, the US cruised in this one and put themselves right on the precipice of World Cup qualification.
It came down to this in Orlando. Against Panama. Can we get an eagle screech? The USA playing against a team who were hanging onto their World Cup lives by a thread. A team, by the way, who'd beaten us, let's remember, back in Panama in October. What a different world that was. And seconds before kickoff, the hopes were flip-flopped as Costa Rica news of their result. They defeated El Salvador 2-1, a result which meant the US would not be able to automatically qualify on this night, even with victory. But a win would all but lock down the place. It would require a crazy, crazy, crazy loss. Never out of the question with this US men's team to Costa Rica. We'll talk about that. But those were the stakes. Really, the sliding door CONCACAF scenarios. Lots of storylines before kickoff around our deep squad truly being tested by injuries and suspensions. This was a game about glory and physical recovery. Remember, just one CONCACAF team had won the subsequent game after the Azteca. It takes a lot physically and mentally out of the players, and even Pulisic talked freely about how much Thursday night had exhausted him. So you saw on the team sheet, and some raised eyebrows ahead of kickoff. De La Torre, Ferreira and Arriola started. Turns out, this is fascinating to me, Davo, a stomach bug caught in Mexico, as you do, knocked out, Gio Reyna from the start. But it was a stomach bug we found out after the game. It hit 20 members of the travelling party. Really Tottenham lasagna 2, electric boogaloo levels of illness, Davo. And I'm kind of shocked that no word came out. It kind of shows you how far this US infrastructure are able to keep the media and the players agents out of, leaking the story. Because I'm pretty sure if this was England, the relationship between the journalists, the agents, the players, it would have come out instantly.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is the positive of the very cozy relationship between the media and this US men's national team, that it never did come out. So a very good thing. And I must say, the players, we'll get to it, but the players who came into that starting lineup performed admirably, beyond admirably, superbly.
Yeah, which was against the narrative of that kickoff feeling. There was a lot of shock when we saw the starting lineup. As US fans, we often gravitate towards the new hope. The hype train has flickered in qualifying from one player to another. Gio Reyna, after his incredible run against Mexico, by the way, an incredible run to nowhere. Talking Heads fans, we should note that. It was very fascinating. The US soccer official account beautifully put the run against Mexico when he beat 6 players, I think 2 of them twice. And then kind of fell over at the final hurdle. They put that to music and it was delirious. Dortmund retweeted that piece of social content, and all the German fans were, their response was very different. They were like, A, the defending was terrible. B, there were players left and right of him who were in better positions and he should have passed. And C, why are we celebrating a run where possession is eventually coughed up? But it was enough to make us all, Gio Reyna would be our saviour mindset. When he wasn't in the starting lineup and Arriola there was a lot of panic. I will be candid. Retrospectively, before kickoff, I felt a slight sickness, a dread, a fear. And when I dug into it, my own emotions, I'm getting quite good at digging into my own emotions after this Everton season. I realised, Davo, much of it was really just trauma from 2017, from Cuba, from Trinidad and Tobago. Panama, they were listing themselves, that shot 1-1 draw at home to bottom of the table Honduras. They started this cycle so well. They've really flailed. And so I felt both fear and a certain confidence. And yes, they seemed desperate from the off. They really came at us, bro. The calming presence of Miles Robinson, Stealth, one of my favourite players on this US team, was there like an American Van Dijk to really smother things when it got a little loose at the back, which it did often. Took about 10 minutes, but the US started to press and build and try and force Panama into mistakes. A quiver full of corners ensued, ratcheting up the pressure until, thanks to the god of VAR, penalty, Davey.
It was an interesting penalty because I have no idea how this was not seen by the referee without the benefit of VAR. It was an amazing offence because he both pulled Zimmerman to the ground, handballed, and all he needed to do was like simulate a dive or something, and it could have been like a triple offence.
When you watch it in slow motion, I think he got his genitals out and actually made love to the ball as well. I mean, he did it all. He did it all. Oh, Godoy, he did it all in this moment. I mean, it was the old school game, Mortal Kombat. That was what this offence looked like. It was a slap to the face and a kind of foot sweep, just thudding Zimmerman to the ground in finish him, Godoy style. I mean, poor Zimmerman, heroic, innocent, who's actually Godoy's club teammate.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what Godoy was thinking other than, this is CONCACAF. This used to be totally permissible. This is how we play. But instead, CONCACAF with VAR, this CONCACAF VAR, where both federations immediately offer cash prizes to whoever's making the VAR judgment. Whoever offers the most gets a decision. I do think in CONCACAF, the referees only go to the screen to watch it just so they can enjoy the violence and go, yeah, woohoo, violenza.
But it was amazing. You remember that 2018 World Cup game, Rog, where England played Panama, and Panama tried to defend corners in exactly the same way by pulling English players to the ground. I think Harry Kane had a hat-trick that day. 2 of them from the penalty spot.
Yeah, there was one where a Panamanian pulled out a chainsaw to defend the free kick. And I was like, creative, but a bit excessive.
He did. He went straight for the post to try and make the goal smaller on both sides, to try and ratchet it down a few feet.
It's all allowed in this Star Wars cantina that is CONCACAF. Up stepped Pulisic eventually, slapped home the penalty. Fascinated by his celebration in that moment, Davo, because you could just see the relief flow off him in waves.
Yeah, it was a, well-taken penalty. I think he'd looked well up for it from the beginning of the game, actually. It was one of those moments I thought, he's going to have a good game. He looked very up for it. And a player who has been, criticised a lot, Rog, a player who, was actually dropped in the starting lineup in the last window, a player wearing the captain's armband. He is the US's best player. However much we want other people to, overtake him, he is the US's best player, and he stepped up and played like it this evening.
By the way, there's memories of that Ochoa save. The heat he took, Pulisic, after the misses against Mexico. You saw in this moment just him letting go of that. You saw the joy, the wonder. The Porn Stars guys, I only watched the Porn Stars show for their analysis of football. They knew, we laugh, but they knew what they were talking about. He is the LeBron James of soccer. But this being the USA, let's be clear, it was not always pretty in the first half. Anthony Robinson, whom the American media have decided to call Jedi, which is a bit, like the English media deciding to call Harry Maguire slabhead, unironically, trying to play the ball out the back incessantly. We'll talk a bit more about it. I try not to dwell on glaring weaknesses on this night of glory, but while we're still like, what are you doing, lads? Pulisic drove us forward again, got wiped out. Robinson, God bless him, he is one of those fullbacks who looks better going forward than he does when he has to do defendy things, right, David?
Yeah, without a doubt. He is wonderful going forward, and he's got real speed, genuine speed on that flank.
And Areola, that much maligned MLS star, leapt up to meet it with a fine angled header. Dude, by the way, is 5'6", I think he had one-headed goal before in his career. Honestly, watching him leap up, it was like watching Spud Webb dunking the basketball. Dude hit it with all the tam and gam in the world. It was magnificent.
Yeah, it will go on his highlight reel for sure. And the defender he beat for it was like 6 inches taller than him. It was just a fantastic glancing header, fantastic goal, fantastic cross. 2-0 to the US.
Gam tam, thank you, man. And within 4 minutes, it would get better for the United States. Ferreira slapped home some slop in the box, finishing sharply. I've got to say, my heart broke for Pepe as he did, but this was the first time an American striker had scored since Pepe had back in October. Paul Carr tweeted, the US men's national team is the first ever to score 3 times in the first 27 minutes of any Hex/Ocho game. Thank you, CONCACAF, for letting us learn shapes. Suddenly, all the challenges the US had faced over the past year, the struggle, the lack of production, the lack of creativity. You know, I think the US had like 4 first-half goals in the previous 12 Ocho games. Our big mistake, I realised, Davo, was not playing more games against teams who were eliminated. We need to play more eliminated teams where our opponents lack the will. When we do that, Davo, we are unbeatable.
There was definitely some sort of tired legs and souls and in that Panamanian team. One thing we haven't discussed, Rog, I was happy to see them playing in Orlando, not trying to play this fixture in Anchorage.
Yes.
Or somewhere that would be on ice in Chicago. I was relieved that we actually played in a warm weather stadium.
Yeah, there is a correlation there. Look, when you do not force your players to take the field in hypothermic conditions, David, the big learning was these boys can play, right?
I know, it's amazing. It's amazing stuff. And with the crowd, I think the atmosphere in Orlando was absolutely fantastic and got behind the team early. And I think you're right, in that first half, the US weren't playing that well. And yet, there they were, 3-0 up after, 27 minutes, you just said? And ceded possession constantly, and yet 3-0 up.
And other niggles, Zach Steffen, I will say, on 2 occasions made Matt Turner look great. He can be, on occasion, we've seen it for Manchester City in his limited minutes. We saw it here last night. Shaky in his decision-making. And I will say this, I hope that we can have Berhalter make a decision about who is our number 1 goalkeeper. So the certainty, just like, to be candid, I hope we decide who is our captain. This notion of the rotating armband, it's the kind of overthinking of details that can undermine teams. In players' minds, the simpler international football is, the clearer, I think the better it is. And last night felt like a party, a celebration. But we need to acknowledge the way the US do try and play out the back remains so naive. Panama were poor, but they will get decimated against real opposition if they do that, right, David?
Yeah, without a doubt. And on faster surfaces as well, because the surface wasn't particularly quick down there. But it's it's something that they've got to figure out. I did like the tenacity. I don't mind watching the US play without possession and play on the counter. I think the US historically have played very well like that. And I think there was a lot of fight in this performance and a lot of, frankly, clinical finishing, which was superb to watch. Hasn't been true of this team for a while. But yeah, the playing out of the back thing, and certainly with Zach Steffen in goal, it looks particularly shaky when the ball is in their own defensive third.
Not a comment for today, because David and I want to drink the Kool-Aid, but my God, we are going to... I could not agree more. If this team plays on the counter-attack, delirious. If this team thinks it's going to out-football superior outfits, in the long term, we will be punished. But to cap the first half, another penalty, another Godoy foul. This one on Miles Robinson. Slightly generous from the referee, Dave. A bit of argy-bargy in the box. Not really Will Smith, Chris Rock in terms of violence.
Yeah, no. I mean, slight detail. But, I mean, frankly, the Panamanians were playing so physically, at the back there. They risk it. They do give away a lot of penalties. And, Christian stood up. And, I mean, this was the second penalty. He just slapped high. When you're not putting them along the ground, you're trying to do it with some form of anger. The goalie got a fingertip to this, but just couldn't keep it out. Fantastic penalty again.
Credit Godoy. I think he might just be the offensive creator Greg has been looking for. But you're right. Pulisic scored again from the spot, then did, let's just call it, the best, worst worm I've ever seen. At the time, we were all like waiting for US Soccer to tweet something like, Christian, with all due respect, can you ask us before you unfurl a celebration like that? I mean, he seems to be one of the world's great postmodern celebrators, David. The crappy griddy that he did, the half-ass worm that he dropped last night. I mean, there are, let's just say, intestinal worms that have suffered that are less painful than the one that we had to watch last night. And
well, maybe this was a comment on the intestinal worms that some of his teammates had picked up in Mexico.
Tribute, lads. I know you're suffering, but this worm is worse than whatever you got inside it. I did wonder if at times that Christian's trolling us, and we found out later that Christian actually did this as a tribute to a high school student and cancer patient, Mason Ogle, who the team met with ahead of the game. But I do think there's something fascinating about Christian. He's a man who's both willing to really assert himself against US Soccer when they post a photograph of him in an extremely small hat. But he's also...
Was that his problem with it?
I don't know. He was like, we all laughed when he's like, hey guys, I mean, not to be...
With respect.
Yeah, with respect. That's a silly photo of me in a silly hat. But he's clearly image conscious, but he's also willing to do this kind of thing. And I find that dislocation between those two Christians, I find that absolutely fascinating from a creative expression point of view. At Jay Henthorne, GFOP tweeted us, what if America trained its best dancers to be soccer players, which I love. And again, Christian, a lot of this game was analysing the Christian of the US team, the Christian of international football, a very different creature than the Christian of club football. The half ended with a bit of comic shovey. Pulisic losing his rag after some elite CONCACAF shithousery from the Panamanian bench. I think they flung a football into Luca Del Torre's down belows. And who steamed in to protect him, Davo? It was Pulisic going all in forcer. Like, he's not just Clint Dempsey or Landon Donovan, the best footballer on the team. Dude thinks he's Jermaine Jones, like the team's enforcer, Davo. Have we ever seen him like this before?
I'm trying to think of it. I don't think we have. I've not ever seen him get up in anybody's face before.
I will say a Premier League referee would have been harsher on Christian for this kind of what they view as retaliation and instigating. In CONCACAF, I think the referees just asked for the player's shirt at halftime for their kids. But I watched Christian, the US player, and I do see a difference to Christian, the Chelsea player. I used to speak to Landon Donovan when he was at his peak, and he'd describe just how much pressure he experienced as the face of the US team for so long, as really the face of the game on the men's side and the growth of the game on the men's side, as a human on whom success or failure of this team was projected. And let's not forget, how can we forget, the failure of this team has been epic over the past 5 years, and it's all projected on him, the exaggerated emotions of frustration and disappointment and trauma in dark times. I think they'd land on him differently when he's playing for the US, David.
Yeah, definitely. And he's got a crowd of, patriotic, flag-waving, raucous fans behind him. He's clearly, not just a symbol of the US men's national team. I mean, he feels great national pride. That comes across in every interview with him about playing for his country. And so I think he's a little pumped up on that. Probably doesn't bleed Chelsea blue to quite the same extent that he bleeds red, white and blue. But that's international football as well. That's how international football works a lot.
At CT Fitzpatrick noted, US men's national team, unstoppable, winning gastrointestinal distress. Berhalter needs to have the team only eating at shady 1.5 Yelp star restaurants when they get to Doha. Well, it's the kind of thing, Greg, we'll be doing, just like taking them to Papa John's after Papa John's when they get to Doha, Dave. But second half, wide open. When we say wide open, I mean wide open. It could honestly, that game could have been 8-7, couldn't it? 9-12 or something. It was like a delirious fever dream end to end.
Yeah, there was so much space all over the park. It was like they were playing on a field 4 times bigger than regulation. It was sort of shocking, and I think Panama really wanted to be anywhere else, but in Orlando yesterday night, and it really showed in the second half.
Gio Reyna came on with his head shaved. Chris Rock not mocking him anytime soon. Support bald rights, and he looks so good centrally, looking to play killer balls at every single opportunity. His combination with Pulisic, feeding him in behind, was a joy to behold. I think we're going to spend a couple of months now dreaming of what a Gio, Weston, Christian Pulisic, Tyler Adams four in the centre of that park is going to look like. Lost on the night was Ferreira. Honestly, could have had a hat-trick of his own. Nice thing, I thought, would have been to put Pepe in at some point. A goal for him in last night's game. We are going to need Pepe in the next decade. What a boost to his dented confidence that could have been. And I do wonder, I've got to tell you, I've been thinking about this, Davo. I wonder now, when the US do qualify, I do believe they will, if there's any dual nationals who have not yet committed to the United States, who play striker in Europe, who will see this opportunity. You know, the US, this is one piece of flapping skin coming out of qualification. We still lack a reliable number 9, and it's a massive opportunity. Commit to the United States. You play in a World Cup, and then you have the commercial opportunity of being part of a World Cup on home soil in 2026, which is what dual nationals agents see right now. I've got a feeling we might see one more gent commit before November.
That feels like inside information. I like it, Roger.
Dominic Calvert-Lewin going to make that one-time change. But I digress. Back to the game. The Pulisic hat-trick goal. A thing of beauty. Really a poor man's Bergkamp.
Yeah, it was a brilliant goal. I had to watch it a few times to figure out even whether it was tremendously fortunate or whether it was intentional.
Where'd you come out, Doctor?
I'm pretty convinced it was intentional.
All of it?
Yeah, it felt like a rehearsed move to me that, through his own legs turn. Believe me, I think there's good fortune in the bounces and the position of the Panamanian legs. But I think he moved as he intended and the ball obliged, and a great finish at the end. It was a superb goal, a goal that will be played all over the world. It's already on Chelsea's social media. Fantastic finish.
First career hat-trick at the international level for Christian Pulisic. To me, that first touch was slightly mishit, but the spin executed, he kind of nutmegged himself, which perhaps gave him the idea for the second touch. A brilliant nutmeg. And I loved, he gave the goalkeeper the eyes. It seemed to make so much time for himself where there wasn't time, and then rifled that ball home for the hat-trick. And he celebrated, pointing at the sky with eyes closed. And you could see, again, just a relief rolling off him in waves. And I thought back to the image of teen Christian, back in Cuba, Trinidad and Tobago, at the final whistle, kneeling over, just bent double in agony, disbelief, sadness, anger, shock, really the pain we all felt, anyone who loves the development of the game in this nation. And it was all reflected in his young body. And now 1,629 days later, yes, I did the math, pointing up at the sky, same person, the relief, the joy, the dominance, from agony to exhilaration of scoring the hat-trick, which takes the US men to the cusp of the return. We've always said, Dave, sports are best when they transcend sports. And in that transformation, I honestly couldn't humanly imagine what Pulisic was experiencing in that moment. It was like watching an exorcism, the ridding of the ghost of the past, the ghost of failure. And he did it with tenacity and wonder on the day.
Yeah. And look, we should say we fully expected the US men's national team to qualify for this World Cup. The US men's national team should qualify for the World Cup out of CONCACAF every time. What happened in 2017 was an aberration. It was ridiculous. It was so many mistakes were made, but it still happened to these players, and they experienced it, and they are human. And Christian, for whom I think that World Cup was very important in his young career, and he's going to always feel like, a regret that he missed out. He ended up carrying this team on his shoulders. And yes, Panama weren't the, toughest opposition. They were eliminated, as you said, at this stage. They sort of folded, wilted terribly in this game. But that moment, it was pure human relief, and of a player who is still seeking, is very, very ambitious to make a genuine name for himself on the world stage, not just a name for himself amongst US men's national team fans who see him as being on the world stage, where the world doesn't quite see him on the world stage in the same way. But that's where Christian wants to be. That's where he has the potential to be. And, this is a moment that takes him closer to that.
Godoy got his John Joe Shelby hat-trick with a fine late header to destroy the clean sheet. No one talk about how our defence was a bit crap last night. Okay, we all agree, right? We're going to smother that story, pinky swear. Let's conveniently forget also that we crushed Panama 4-0 before crapping the bed in Couva in 2017. Let's not talk about that again. Big picture, massive takeaway. You've already said it. Our boys are so bloody good when we don't make them play in freezing conditions. Let these boys play from this point on. Let them football their way into World Cup qualification. We don't need to clever overthink. Let's create the best home field advantage for the United States men. This young team of striving, big dreaming baby Eagles is to let them play bloody football and let the football speak volumes. Subscribe here for more Men in Blazers videos and courage.